Winter is coming. You know, like, because like Game of Thrones, you know, because it's like, yeah. Yeah, I've never actually seen it, but that doesn't change the fact that winter is coming to Destiny 2. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? Well, if you've been playing a lot of Crucible like me, you've probably been noticing a very troubling pattern lately. So, today we're going to be talking about that and breaking down exactly what I mean. So why don't we go ahead and get into it. So with the release of Arc 3.0, we now have all of our 3.0 subclasses. Now, even notice in the match that I'm in right now, if you look at the top of the screen, although people are dying rapidly, nobody in this game is even on Arc. And that's pretty justifiable considering that Arc might be the worst 3.0 subclass. I think that's up to personal interpretation, you know, that's everyone's opinion-based stuff, but what you can't have an opinion differing on is the fact that Stasis is very strong. I mean, think about it. In a game like Destiny that is so focused on movement, having something that can outright stun you and make you sit completely still is inherently overpowered. We'll talk about that a little more later, but I just want to touch on it now and talk about the fact that that is so strong, and people are starting to remember that. With the hype of 3.0s coming out, everybody was trying new stuff. With healing nades on Solar 3.0, everybody was loving Solar, and they still are. Void has a lot of good things to debuff your enemies, lock them down. Void Warlock is one of my favorite things to ever exist. Of course, I'm a Blink main, so that makes sense for me, but even on Arc Hunter, I still just don't love Blink as much as I do on my Void Warlock, just because I think the kit is so strong and synergizes with itself so perfectly. Now, you come back to something like Stasis, though, which was the first 3.0 subclass to release. When it was released, it was already a 3.0 subclass. It had the current system that we're used to today when we get a new 3.0. So, of course, it was going to be strong from the very beginning. And you saw when it was released, of course, it was the only thing used for a very long time. Why would you want to go back and use some kind of 2.0 system when you have something as beautiful as the 3.0s? And nowadays we have 3.0 for everything. So everyone has so much choice now. The thing is, when you have too much choice, you tend to just choose the strongest thing, and that is exactly where the player base is falling back into. If you look at something like different builds in the game, look at Lord of Wolves and Omnioculus. Look at Loreley's Splendor. This stuff is so strong, but so simple, so easy to use. There's not a very high skill ceiling in the slightest to use those things, and that's why they were strong for so long. Heck, Loreley's Splendor is still incredibly strong, and of course you're going to see it a bunch of times when you play just now. In Lord of Wolves and Omnioculus, sure, they finally got nerfed. Of course they got nerfed about 6 months too late. They were just running rampant forever because Bungie can't address things that are broken fast enough, but that's not the point of today's video, although we might touch on it later. My point is, Stasis has and always will be very, very strong, just inherently, but people have kind of forgot about that, or at least they didn't care as much because we had so much new stuff coming out that that's where they put their focus. When you have a bunch of new stuff coming out, you want to try it. You want to see, well, maybe this is stronger, and in some cases there are some stuff that is almost as strong, if not stronger. Like I said, everybody having healing nades on Solar 3.0 really made that quite strong. But with Classy Restoration being removed at the end of last season, you have seen a big dip in the people using Solar. Of course, it is still strong even without Classy Restoration, but that was really what was making that subclass so incredibly busted. So without it, it's just not as top tier. My biggest concern is that we're going to do what we have done many times before, where the community is going to fall back into a pattern of going back to what was the strongest at one point and was never actually nerfed or made any weaker, but people just kind of forgot of its existence because they said, ooh, look, new shiny thing in front of me, and when you have that new shiny thing in front of you, you completely forget about the old crusty stuff. But then again, you can dig it out of the earth and find out, hey, this thing still works pretty good too, and that's what's happening with Stasis right now. The way I see it, there's only a few ways to fix this. For one, they could go ahead and pre-nerf Stasis. The fact that it is still so strong is quite scary to me. That's the part that's really scaring me, you know? People will go back to it. If it wasn't as strong, then people wouldn't flock to it as much as they're about to. But it's not probably gonna happen. Bungie doesn't really pre-nerf stuff. What they do is they wait until something's busted, and then they, you know, wait 4 months after that, and then they say they're going to fix it in a TWAB, and then we wait 4 more months, and then it gets nerfed. But it doesn't really get nerfed because then people realize 2 months later that it was never actually really nerfed, and then we go back to playing it again. And yeah, you see, that's kind of the entire point of this video, is that we're back to another one of those situations where that's exactly what's kind of happened. The only time I can really remember a noticeable and good nerf to Stasis is when they nerfed Shatter Crutching, you know, Shatter Dive Hunters, because that was completely busted and one-shotting, and obviously that got actually nerfed, and it doesn't one-shot anymore. Hooray, they did one thing right. Sorry, am I being a little negative? Well, if I am and you don't like it, then, yeah, I don't really care. But the point is, Stasis is coming back, and we should all be ready for it. The only other way I see to prevent the absolute rise of Stasis coming back is to go ahead and start adding little things back into different 3.0 systems. So you go ahead to these other subclasses and you give them some stuff back that was removed or add some new stuff to them. For a big example, I want to talk about Void 3.0 on Warlock. Now, of course, like I said, I play a lot of Blink Warlock. Of course, you see that in the gameplay right now, and it's something I love a lot. But something that always itched me the wrong way was the fact that they took away some different melee options for us. If you look at something like Solar 3.0 Warlock, they have 2 melee options. You go ahead and look at all the throwing knives that hunters have and whatnot, and the different melee options they have. Even our 3.0 hunter has different melee options. But then you go ahead and you look at Warlock on Void 3.0, we got Pocket Singularity, which is debatably one of the worst melees in the entire game. Sure, you can do some fun stuff with it. You know, you can proc your Devour from afar, you can knock people into walls at Mach speed and kill them from impact damage, but that stuff is few and far between, and honestly, a lot of the times, your Pocket Singularity can be a bit of a nuisance to you. It can push your enemies in directions that they shouldn't be going because of the way momentum works in this game, and it can honestly screw you over. But the thing is, there used to be another melee option for Void Warlocks that was incredibly strong, effective, and very loved by the community, and that was the old Middle Tree Nova Warp melee. You could punch somebody, it would push them back, and then after a second they would explode. This did a bunch of damage, it had an area effect because of the explosion, and it was just overall a beautiful melee, and one of my favorites in the entire game. I always loved running Middle Tree, even though I didn't have something like Devour, because I could use Nova Warp and I could use this awesome melee. But for some reason, even though that was already coded into the game, it was right there, and all they had to do was give us access to it on Void 3.0 Warlock. They completely took it out of the game, which makes no sense to me. And right now, this is my point. All they have to do is re-enable it. It's already coded into the game. All they have to do is say, here you go, it's back in that subclass. And then that gives a little piece of freshness back to this Void 3.0 Warlock subclass. And they could do that with a bunch of other stuff. I don't know particularly how much other stuff they took away like that from other subclasses, but I'm sure there is some stuff. So leave that in the comments if you can think of any other examples. But even still, they could make 1 or 2 new things for some subclasses and throw them in every season. Just sprinkle them around. People will love that. People will want to go and try that new stuff, and that'll keep people on new subclasses instead of just defaulting back to the super strong stuff that we know is still strong because it was never actually nerfed or touched that much. Now, I think I covered my point pretty well for this part of the video, but I do want to go ahead and break down Stasis just a little more and talk about why it's so inherently overpowered. Stasis really shouldn't exist. When you think about it for 2 seconds, I'm going to bring up what I was starting to talk about earlier, and that's the fact that Stasis is just too strong in a game like Destiny. Destiny is an extremely high mobility game. Very high movement, you're blinking around, you're floating around, you're hunter jumping around, whatever it may be. Stasis completely puts a stop to that. For one, when you're just stasis slowed, you can't use your movement ability. Now, I find this extremely ridiculous because I noticed something once I started playing Blink Hunter, and that's the fact that you can still use your hunter dodge when you're stasis slowed, but you can't use your blink, and I'm assuming your jumps as well. I don't understand how that makes any sense, and it just seems wildly inconsistent. How can I move my entire body so well while there's icicles crackling through my veins that I can do an entire hunter dodge into another universe, but I can't put my fist in front of my hand to start a blink? That doesn't really check out to me. If you wanted to do some kind of thing where your jumps only went half as high when you're stasis slowed, or your blinks only went half as far when you're stasis slowed, I could understand that. But the fact that I can't do them at all, yet I can still do my entire hunter dodge, and I'm sure you can probably do that new Titan dodge as well, just doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't make any sense. Heck, you can't even slide, I'm pretty sure, while you're stasis slowed. How is this stuff checking out? It really just doesn't add up, and I'm not very good at math, but this is some simple calculations that I can do in my tiny peanut brain. Now, besides that, as I was saying before, stasis is just inherently broken. You go from that slow to the next step of stasis, with its main gimmick being freezing your enemies. Now, there's some very extremely easy ways to freeze your enemies, the biggest one being, in my opinion, the Warlock melee. Now, this thing goes straight into your enemy's butt cheeks and turns them into a popsicle boy, as I so lovingly call it, because, hey, if I can't get it taken out of the game or anything like that, I might as well make some jokes and cope with it, right? So when I get turned into a popsicle boy, what are my choices? Well, nothing except for one, which is suffer. Most of the time, if your enemy isn't a complete lame brain loser, they're going to kill you very easily. They're going to freeze you, they're going to stand on top of you and smack you with a shotgun or a fusion rifle, or they're going to freeze you from a distance with an Ozymancy, double cold snap nade, like I was fighting earlier, and hit you with a Lawrence driver because you literally cannot move. It's pretty hard to miss a headshot when your enemy literally cannot move, although I know know there are some players out there that still somehow miss that combo, and if that is you, it's probably time to hang up the sticks, buddy, because, hey, you just kind of embarrass yourself in front of the entire world. That being said, the fact that this stuff is even allowed to happen is just what blows my mind. It just shouldn't be able to exist anymore. The problem is one thing. Once you release this stuff, you can't take it back. You know, Bungie put this into the live client, and they said no takesies backsies, so now we're stuck with it. So the only thing we can really do is deal with it. That's why I want them to go ahead and put stuff into other subclasses to kind of ward off players from all flocking to one thing. Because here's the thing, when something is really strong, different content creators and whatnot are going to start talking about it. They're going to start posting about it. And then you're going to start talking to your friends, right? It's a funnel, and it goes down to the base levels where every single player starts using something because we all know it's strong. That's fine, it's going to happen. The problem is when there's nothing being put out by the developers to sway our minds and our gameplay styles to different options. When we all start grouping up on this stuff, that's where it's really going to become a problem. And that's why they need to get ahead of this before it becomes that big problem. But again, this section is really just talking about how Stasis really shouldn't exist. Now, I think adding another subclass that was for darkness was an awesome choice. I just think the execution of it was the problem. And maybe there's some other examples I can give you of something like Witherhoard, for example. I don't think Witherhoard should be available in PvP. I think a big problem with Destiny and Bungie is that they're afraid to say, hey, this is too strong in PvP, we're not going to allow it anymore. Now, not allowing an entire subclass might be a little extreme, but when it comes to something like Witherhoard, I firmly believe it just shouldn't be allowed in PvP. It just ruins the entire competitive integrity of PvP in my opinion, and especially something like Trials or Survival. Maybe you could make an argument that it's okay in Control, but if you look at how strong something like a Witherhoard is in a weekend where we have capture points in Trials, it is just off the charts cuckoo bananas how strong that is. Now look, I don't know what they would really do and how drastic they would go with something like removing things from PvP or saying, hey, you can't use it in the game modes, but that's something I would very much like to see because there's just too much scummy stuff. You look at another scummy thing that's been rising in the ranks right now, which is the Dead Messenger and Arc Warlock melee combo. It's completely skillless. All you have to do is shoot your Dead Messenger, slide in, boom, you have free kills, and honestly, you can wipe an entire team in about half a second, and that kind of skillless stuff just really shouldn't exist in the higher tier competitive playlist. If you want to make survival and trials act like they're competitive in some way, that's what you call them, you say these are the competitive game modes, then you need to actually reflect that in your actions. You need to say stuff like this is scummy, we're not going to get ahead of ourselves and nerf it, but at the very least we are going to disable it in these game modes. How do you do that? Well, obviously you can't disable something like the melee itself, so maybe you disable the Dead Messenger. Again, you give me your opinions on that. Is that too drastic? That's just how I feel, but I know everyone has different opinions about that kind of stuff. But I really should maybe just hand this off to somebody else that can give you their best opinion on Stasis and just really tell you how they feel about it. And that person is me. So I'll let him take it from here. Yep, there it is. One more straight ahead here. I want to help our teammate because, yeah, this guy's super Stasis crutch. Oh, what happened, man? What happened? Did you get a little ice on your feet? Maybe you slipped on the ground and woo, down you went? Cracked your little head open? Well, hey, here's the thing. You don't need any brain cells to use Stasis, we could tell that. So if you even did crack your head open, you know, I don't know, maybe a few snowflakes would fall out of there, but probably not much more than that, Frosty the Snowman. I think you're doing pretty good for yourself, buddy. Luckily, at least you're only going to be alive in the winter when the magic of family and Christmas comes together and we put it all in that hat on your head. But I'm going to knock that thing off and send you back into the underground, okay? See you later, buddy. Fuck Stasis.